Dr. Blake Stevens was elbow-deep in paperwork when the emergency alarm cut through the quiet hum of Station Titan 7. The sound was sharp and insistent, the kind that made your heart skip before your brain caught up. He looked up from his desk just as his coffee mug rattled against the metal surface. The hallway outside erupted into chaos. Footsteps pounded past his office door. Voices shouted over each other, some in languages Blake barely recognized. He pushed back from his desk and stepped into the corridor, nearly colliding with Dr. Kelvin, one of the station's senior xenobiologists. The Thurian medic had 4 arms and right now all of them were shaking. "What's going on?" Blake asked, but Kelvin was already pulling up a data pad, his face drained of its usual purple color. "Incoming emergency patient," Kelvin said, his voice barely above a whisper. "You need to see this." Blake took the data pad and felt his stomach drop. The manifest displayed on the screen showed a creature classification he'd only read about in textbooks. Void Serpent. Juvenile class. The words Apex Predator blinked in angry red letters across the top of the file. Below that, another line read Extreme Caution, Lethal Force Authorized if Containment Fails. Around them, the other veterinarians and medical staff were backing away from the loading bay entrance. Some were making excuses about other patients. Others just looked terrified. Blake couldn't blame them. Void serpents had a reputation that preceded them across the galaxy. They breathed plasma hot enough to melt starship hulls. Their bite force could crush reinforced steel. They were the kind of creature that made hardened soldiers think twice. "It's got an infected fang," Kelvin continued, scrolling through the medical scans. "Been in pain for 3 cycles according to the Dracorian ambassador who brought it in. But Blake, listen to me. This species doesn't do well with medical intervention. 6 months ago, a team of 5 specialists tried to treat one on Outpost Kepler. 3 of them didn't make it home." Blake studied the holographic image rotating on the datapad. The serpent was nearly 30 feet long, its body coiled tight with agony. Its scales shimmered with that distinctive bioplasma glow that made void serpents so dangerous. But what caught Blake's attention was the creature's eye in one of the captured images. It wasn't filled with rage or predatory instinct. It was filled with pain and fear. "How bad is the infection?" Blake asked. Kelvin pulled up another scan. "It's deep. Root level. If it's not treated soon, the infection will spread to its plasma glands. That would be fatal." "Then we treat it." The corridor went quiet. Every staff member within earshot turned to stare at Blake like he'd just volunteered to jump out an airlock. "Sir, with all respect, we should refuse this case," Kelvin said carefully. "Station protocols actually allow us to turn away patients deemed too dangerous for our facility's safety rating." Blake handed back the datapad and started walking toward the loading bay. "Prep Surgical Suite 3. The big one with the reinforced walls." "Blake, please think about this." "I am thinking about it." Blake stopped and turned to face his colleague. "That creature has been suffering for 3 days. It's scared, it's in pain, and every instinct it has is screaming at it to fight or flee. If we turn it away, it dies. Simple as that." Kelvin's forearms crossed over his chest. "And if we try to help it, we might die." "Maybe." Blake shrugged. "But I grew up on a ranch back in Montana. My dad taught me something when I was about 10 years old. We had this horse, mean as hell, would kick anyone who came near its stall. Everyone said we should sell it or put it down. But my dad, he just sat with that horse every day. Talked to it. Brought it apples. Never pushed it. Took 3 months, but eventually that horse became the gentlest animal on our property. You know what the problem was? It had a cracked tooth. Been in pain so long it thought everyone was trying to hurt it." He started walking again, and this time Kelvin followed, though his arms were still trembling. The loading bay doors hissed open. The transport shuttle sat in the center of the massive space, its cargo door already lowered. Inside, Blake could hear the sounds of distress. A low, rumbling hiss that vibrated through the deck plates. The scrape of scales against metal. The drip of something hitting the floor that sizzled on contact. The Dracorian ambassador stood well back from the shuttle, his reptilian face rigid with barely controlled fear. He was a tall creature easily 7 feet, covered in ceremonial scales that marked him as high-ranking. But even he looked small next to what was in that shuttle. Blake approached slowly. He could see the void serpent now, thrashing against the magnetic restraints that held it loosely in place. The restraints were designed to contain without injuring, but the creature was testing them with every movement. Plasma dripped from its jaws, glowing green and toxic. Its scales rippled with bioluminescent patterns that pulsed in time with what Blake assumed was its heartbeat. He stopped about 15 feet away and took a breath. Behind him, he could feel every eye on the station watching through the observation windows. Some were probably recording this, thinking they were about to witness a disaster. "Hey there, buddy," Blake said, keeping his voice soft and level. He held his hands out where the creature could see them, palms open, non-threatening. "Yeah, I know. I know it hurts. That tooth is really bothering you, isn't it?" The serpent's massive head swung toward him. One eye, easily the size of Blake's entire head, focused on him with surprising clarity. The pupil dilated, contracting, trying to make sense of this small creature approaching without weapons or armor. "Let's get you feeling better, okay?" Blake took another step forward. "Nobody here wants to hurt you. I promise." For just a moment, the thrashing stopped. The serpent's body went still, coiled tight but motionless. It was watching him, really watching him, and Blake could almost see the calculation happening behind those alien eyes. "That's it," Blake murmured, taking another careful step. "Good little dragon. We're going to help you." Behind him, someone whispered what sounded like a prayer in a language Blake didn't recognize. Someone else whispered in another language. Then a third voice joined in. Blake didn't look back. He kept his eyes on the serpent, kept his voice steady, and took another step forward into what everyone else thought was certain death. Blake had decided to call the serpent Blaze. It seemed fitting for a creature that literally glowed with bioplasma energy. The medical team had administered a mild sedative, just enough to take the edge off the pain without putting Blaze's unique metabolism at risk. Too much sedation and the creature's plasma glands would shut down, which could be fatal. Too little and the pain would keep him aggressive and unpredictable. Right now, Blaze lay coiled in Surgical Suite 3, the largest room they had. The walls were reinforced with triple-layer composite armor, designed to withstand everything from explosive decompression to direct weapons fire. Blake hoped they wouldn't need to test those specifications today. He sat cross-legged on the floor about 10 feet from Blaze's head, far enough to be outside immediate striking range but close enough to maintain a connection. The serpent's breathing was labored, each exhale releasing a small puff of glowing steam. Every few minutes, a wave of pain would hit and Blaze would hiss, his body tensing and his scales flaring brighter. "Easy, big guy," Blake said in that same steady voice he'd been using since the loading bay. "I know it hurts. We're going to fix it, I promise." From the observation room, his assistant Tix watched through 6 inches of reinforced transparent aluminum. The insectoid's voice crackled through the intercom system, high-pitched with anxiety. "Dr. Stevens, I have to say this is complete insanity. The latest infection scan just came through. That fong is cracked all the way down to the root canal. There's bacterial contamination in the pulp chamber. You understand what this means, yes?" Blake kept his eyes on Blaze. "Tell me." "It means extraction. Full removal. And because of his plasma metabolism, we cannot put him under general anesthesia. He will need to be conscious for the entire procedure." Tix's voice climbed higher. "Do you understand the jaw pressure measurements for an adult void serpent? They could crush a cargo hauler. A juvenile like this one could still bite through a tank. Then I guess we'd better make sure he doesn't want to bite me." Blake reached into the cooling container beside him and pulled out a frozen protein block. The station's food synthesizers had worked overtime creating these, packed with nutrients that void serpents needed. He tossed it gently toward Blaze. The serpent's head lifted slightly. One nostril flared, testing the air. Then, moving with surprising delicacy for such a large creature, Blaze leaned forward and sniffed the protein block. His tongue, forked and glowing faintly, flickered out to taste it. After a moment's consideration, he carefully picked it up between his fangs, mindful of the infected one, and swallowed. "There you go," Blake said, a smile crossing his face. "See? Not so bad. You want another one?" He tossed a second block. Blaze took it more confidently this time. That was how the next 6 hours went. Slow. Patient. Incremental. Blake would talk to Blaze in that calm, steady voice, sometimes about nothing in particular. He told the serpent about growing up on the ranch, about the horses and cattle, about the time he'd helped birth a calf during a snowstorm. He talked about veterinary school, about his first days on the station, about how weird it was to drink recycled water that tasted faintly like metal. The whole time he moved a little closer. Just inches at a time. He'd toss a protein block, wait for Blaze to take it, then shift forward slightly. Let Blaze smell his hand. Let the serpent get used to his presence, his scent, his voice. Around hour 4, Blake reached out and touched Blaze's scales for the first time. They were warm, almost hot, and had a texture like smooth glass with just the faintest hint of roughness. Blaze went very still at the contact, every muscle in his body tensing. Blake held his breath. Then, slowly, Blaze relaxed. "Good boy," Blake whispered. "Good dragon." He tried scratching gently at the scales the way he might pet a nervous dog. Blaze's eyes half closed. Blake moved his hand higher, scratching along the ridge where the serpent's neck met his skull, and discovered something that would have made every xenobiologist in the galaxy drop their datapad in shock. Void serpents, apex predators of the cosmos, creatures that made battleship captains nervous, absolutely loved chin scratches. The rumble that came from Blaze was unlike anything Blake had heard before. It was part purr, part growl, like distant thunder rolling across a mountain range. The serpent's head tilted, pressing into Blake's hand, clearly wanting more. By hour 8, Blake was sitting right beside Blaze, running his hand along the serpent's jaw, carefully feeling the bone structure and muscle placement. He needed to understand the anatomy before tomorrow's procedure. Blaze's tail had curled around behind Blake, not quite touching him but close, almost protective. "Okay, big guy," Blake said softly, looking into that massive eye. "Tomorrow we fix that tooth. It's going to hurt, I won't lie to you. But I need you to trust me. Can you do that? Can you trust me to help you?" Blaze's tail shifted, curling closer until it gently bumped against Blake's back. The movement nearly knocked him over, but Blake just laughed and steadied himself against the serpent's side. In the observation room, a dozen xenobiologists from different departments had gathered to watch. Some were from other stations connected via live feed. One of them had been recording since hour 1. Tix noticed the view counter climbing. 5,000 watchers. 10,000. 20,000. By morning, the footage would be spreading across the galactic network with a caption that someone would add, "Human insanity or genius?" The comments section would be divided, but most would agree on one thing. It was probably both. Blake stood in the center of Surgical Suite 3, dressed in full protective gear. The suit was rated for extreme temperatures and chemical exposure, with reinforced plating across the chest and arms. He wore thick gloves designed to handle COR rows of materials and a helmet with a clear faceplate. The whole setup made him look like he was about to walk into a reactor core instead of perform dental surgery. He knew the gear was mostly for show. If Blaze panicked and decided to bite down, no amount of armor in the galaxy would save him. The suit might buy him a fraction of a second, maybe, but that was it. Still, station protocols required protective equipment for high-risk procedures, and this definitely qualified. The infected Fong was clearly visible now. Over the past day it had gotten worse. The whole tooth glowed with a sickly green color, lit up by bioluminescent bacteria that fed on plasma energy. The infection had spread deeper into the root, and Blake could see discoloration in the surrounding gum tissue. If they waited any longer, the infection would reach Blaze's plasma glands, and that would be the end. Blake placed his palm on Blaze's snout, feeling the heat radiating from those scales. The serpent's eye tracked him, alert and aware despite the mild sedative in his system. "All right, Blaze," Blake said, his voice steady even though his heart was pounding. "I need you to open wide for me, buddy. This is going to hurt, I won't lie about that. But I promise you, I absolutely promise you, it's going to feel so much better when we're done." The surgical bay observation room was packed. Every window had faces pressed against it. Staff from every department had found excuses to be there. The Dracorian ambassador stood front and center, his ceremonial scales somehow looking even more rigid than yesterday. He told Blake that morning he was certain he was about to witness a human's death. Blake had thanked him for the vote of confidence. Tix had actually written a will that morning. Blake had found out when the insectoid accidentally left it open on the main terminal. It was oddly touching in a morbid sort of way. Beyond the physical observers, the Galactic Medical Network had connected nearly every major station and hospital ship in the sector. The view counter in the corner of Tix's monitor had climbed past 50,000 and was still rising. Blake took a breath and gave Blaze a gentle pat. "Ready, big guy?" Blaze's jaw began to open. Slowly, carefully, those massive muscles relaxed and the mouth widened. Blake could see rows of teeth inside, each one charged with bioplasma that made them glow faintly blue. They were beautiful and terrifying at the same time. The infected Fong stood out among them, that sickly green color pulsing with each of Blaze's heartbeats. Blake stepped forward. He actually stepped inside the creature's mouth, positioning himself between teeth that could shear through a starship hull. The smell hit him immediately, a mix of ozone and something acidic that made his eyes water even through the helmet. Heat radiated from every surface. It was like standing inside an engine room. "Good boy," Blake murmured. "Stay just like that. You're doing great." He reached for the extraction tool, a specialized device designed for large-scale dental work. With his other hand he prepared the local anesthetic injector. This was going to be the tricky part. The anesthetic would numb the area, but the injection itself would hurt. Blake positioned the injector at the base of the infected fang and pressed the trigger. Blaze flinched hard, his whole body going tense. The jaw muscles flexed, and for one terrifying moment Blake thought they were about to close. He froze, one hand pressed flat against Blaze's tongue. "I know, buddy. I know it hurts," Blake said quietly. "Just hold on. Almost there. You're so brave. Just a little bit longer." The jaw stayed open. Blaze's eye rolled to look at him and Blake could see the trust there. It was incredible really. This creature, who had every reason to be terrified of medical procedures, was choosing to trust him. Blake worked quickly now. He positioned the extraction tool around the infected fang, feeling it lock into place with a soft click. The tool had mechanical leverage built in, designed to apply steady pressure without sudden jerks. He began to pull, feeling resistance immediately. The fang was anchored deep, and the infection had caused swelling that made everything tighter. He pulled steadily, not rushing it, feeling the tooth shift slightly. More resistance. More pressure. Then, suddenly he felt it give way. The fang came free with a wet sound and green ichor sprayed across his faceplate. Blaze's jaw trembled violently, every muscle quivering with the effort of staying open, but the jaw didn't close. "Done," Blake shouted, stumbling backward out of Blaze's mouth. He held up the extraction tool with the infected fang still gripped in its jaws. Good dragon. Such a good dragon. He immediately grabbed the container of frozen protein blocks and tossed 3 of them toward Blaze. The serpent caught them one after another, swallowing quickly. Then, to the absolute shock of everyone watching, Blaze lowered his massive head and gently pressed it against Blake's chest. It was a nuzzle, affectionate and careful, though it still nearly knocked Blake off his feet. Blake laughed, a sound of pure relief, and wrapped his arms as far around Blaze's head as he could reach. "You did it. You were so brave." Tix's voice came through the intercom, shaking so badly the words were almost unintelligible. "Dr. Stevens, the Galactic medical feed, it's gone completely insane. 17 million viewers right now. The comment sections are calling you either the bravest or the craziest human in the entire sector." Blake pulled off his helmet and scratched under Blaze's chin, grinning despite the exhaustion flooding through him. Can't it be both? The video of Blake extracting Blaze's tooth spread across the galactic network faster than anyone could have predicted. Within hours, it had millions of views. Within days, it was the most watched medical procedure in recorded history. And with that attention came something Blake hadn't quite expected: patience. Lots of patience. 2 weeks after Blaze's successful surgery, Blake's facility had received treatment requests from 40 different star systems. The waiting list stretched out for months. Every single case was a creature that other veterinary stations had refused to treat. Too dangerous, they said. Too unpredictable. Too likely to result in dead medical staff. Blake looked at each request and saw something different. He saw animals in pain who needed help. The first challenging case arrived on a Tuesday. A quantum jelly from the Andromeda sector about the size of a small shuttle. The creature was semi-transparent, its internal organs visible through gelatinous flesh that pulsed with rainbow colors. It also happened to be one of the most venomous organisms known to science. A single touch could dissolve organic matter down to the molecular level. The jelly had a tumor growing in its central mass. Left untreated, it would be fatal within a month. Blake suited up in gloves rated for handling reactor core materials, the kind of equipment usually reserved for working with radioactive waste. He approached the jelly's containment field humming an old country song his dad used to play on the ranch. While he worked, carefully cutting away the tumor with specialized tools, he told the creature about his niece's soccer games back on Earth. "She scored 3 goals last season," Blake said, his hands steady despite working with something that could kill him instantly. "Her team made it to the championships. I promised I'd be there next year to watch her play." The quantum jelly pulsed gently, its colors shifting to softer hues. Somehow it seemed calmer. The next case was even more unusual. A telepathic void whale, one of the massive creatures that lived in deep space, had somehow become infested with parasites. The whale was too large to bring into the station, so Blake had to go to it. They'd converted one of the station's massive water storage tanks into a temporary treatment facility. Blake spent 6 hours swimming alongside the whale, which was still just a juvenile but already the size of a cargo freighter. The parasites had burrowed into the whale's skin, causing infections and pain. Blake applied specialized biogel to each wound, working methodically while the whale projected feelings of gratitude directly into his mind. It was an odd sensation, like someone else's emotions overlapping with his own. "You're welcome, buddy," Blake said, even though the whale couldn't understand English. The feelings seemed to be enough. Then came the crystal wasps. An entire hive of them, each one about the size of Blake's fist, with bodies made of living crystal that could cut through metal. They were carnivorous, aggressive, and their queen had been injured in a territorial dispute with another hive. Without their queen, the entire hive would die. Blake sat in the center of the swarm, letting hundreds of deadly wasps land on his arms, his shoulders, his helmet. They crawled across the clear faceplate, their crystal bodies refracting light into rainbow patterns. He carefully treated the queen's injuries while talking about the weather, the station's recycling problems, and how he really needed to call his sister more often. The wasps never stung him once. Dr. Kelvin watched from the observation room, his 4 arms crossed in a gesture of complete bewilderment. Tix stood beside him, monitoring Blake's vital signs out of habit more than necessity. "How does he do this?" Kelvin asked, not for the first time. On the other side of the glass, Blake was now bottle-feeding an infant star leviathan, a creature that would eventually grow large enough to swallow Moons whole. Currently, it was about the size of a van and making happy chirping sounds as it drank. Tix, who had stopped fainting around the third impossible case, clicked his mandibles thoughtfully. He'd been working with Blake long enough now to have asked that exact question. "I asked him once," Tix said. "He told me something about Earth. About how humans domesticated wolves. Do you know what wolves are?" Kelvin shook his head. "They're pack hunters. Pursuit predators. On Earth they killed to survive. They were dangerous, aggressive animals. But humans, they somehow turned them into pets. They call them dogs now. Millions of humans live with these former predators in their homes. They sleep in their beds. They play with their children." Kelvin's face went pale, his skin shifting from purple to a sickly gray. "It gets stranger," Tix continued. "Some humans keep scaled reptiles as pets. Creatures that evolved from ancient predators. They keep them in glass enclosures and give them names like Fluffy or Mr. Cuddles. Blake showed me pictures once. I had nightmares for a week." "You're saying," Kelvin began slowly, "that humans bonded with predators on their own planet, and now they think everything in the universe is a potential friend," Tix finished. "Exactly." In the surgical suite, Blake had moved on from the star leviathan to a juvenile nebula kraken, a creature with tentacles that crackled with enough electricity to power a small city. He'd somehow taught it to play fetch using a cargo container as a toy. "Who's a good eldritch horror?" Blake cooed, scratching under one of the kraken's main eye stalks. "You are. Yes, you are. Now go get it." He tossed the container across the room. The kraken squealed with delight, its tentacles flashing with excited electrical discharges, and scrambled after it. Throughout the galactic community, other species were beginning to understand something that was both fascinating and mildly terrifying. Humans weren't just fearless when it came to dangerous creatures. They were genuinely, sincerely convinced that the universe's most dangerous organisms just needed proper medical care, some patience, and a little bit of love. And somehow, impossibly, they kept being right. 6 months had passed since Blaze's successful tooth extraction. Blake sat at his desk, surrounded by datapads and holographic displays, reviewing the latest batch of case files. The workload had become intense. Every day brought new requests from across the galaxy. Creatures that no other facility would touch were now being sent to Station Titan 7 with notes that simply said, "Send to Dr. Stevens." He was reading through a particularly interesting case involving a phase-shifting creature from the outer rim when his office door burst open without warning. Tix practically fell through the doorway, all 4 of his eyes wide with panic. His mandibles were clicking rapidly, the insectoid equivalent of hyperventilating. "Dr. Stevens." Tix's voice was several octaves higher than normal. "We have a situation. A very big situation. Blaze is back." Blake looked up from his datapad, a smile crossing his face. He'd wondered when his favorite patient might return for a checkup. Is his tooth bothering him again? Did the extraction site not heal properly? "No, sir. The tooth is fine. But he didn't come alone." Tix pulled up a display on the office wall, showing the external camera feeds. "He brought friends. 12 of them. Adult void serpents. They're circling the station right now, and sir, they're refusing to leave until they see you." Blake felt the blood drain from his face. He stood up so quickly his chair rolled backward and hit the wall. 12? Did you say 12 adult void serpents?" "Yes, sir. Fully grown. Each one is over 100 feet long. Station security is having a complete breakdown. The military escort is on high alert. These creatures could tear through battle cruisers if they wanted to. Blake grabbed his jacket and headed for the door, his mind racing. Adult void serpents didn't travel in groups. They were solitary creatures, territorial and aggressive with each other. Seeing 12 of them together was unheard of. Seeing them circling a space station peacefully was impossible. They found the serpents in the main hangar bay. Station security had somehow been convinced to open the massive external doors, probably because the alternative was having 12 agitated serpents attempting to force their way in. The bay was the largest open space on the station, big enough to hold several shuttles, and right now it was completely filled with scaled, glowing bodies. Blaze sat in the center of the group, and Blake almost didn't recognize him. The young serpent he'd treated 6 months ago had nearly doubled in size. He was easily 50 feet long now, his scales brighter and healthier than ever. The infected fang had been replaced by a new one that glowed with healthy bioplasma. Surrounding Blaze were 11 other void serpents, all of them adults. Their scales shimmered with barely contained power, each one radiating enough heat to make the air ripple. They were magnificent and terrifying in equal measure. The Dracorian ambassador stood near the entrance, his ceremonial robes looking somehow more formal than Blake remembered. His expression was difficult to read, somewhere between awe and disbelief. "Dr. Stevens," the ambassador said, his voice carrying a weight of significance. "In Dracorian culture, void serpents are more than just creatures. They are sacred companions. They choose their riders, and such a choice is the highest honor our people can receive. It happens perhaps once in a generation if we are fortunate." He gestured toward the assembled serpents with a sweeping motion of his scaled arm. "They have chosen you. All of them." Blake stared at him, certain he'd misheard. "I'm sorry, what?" "Every serpent here has declared you as their chosen rider. This has never happened before in all of recorded Dracorian history. 12 serpents choosing the same individual? It is unprecedented." Blaze rumbled forward, moving with the grace of a creature completely comfortable in its own power. He lowered his massive head until it was level with Blake's chest. Behind him, the other 11 serpents did exactly the same thing, a synchronized movement that made the station's military escort take several nervous steps backward. Blake looked at the 12 most dangerous creatures in this sector of space, all of them watching him with what could only be described as affection, and he couldn't help it. He started laughing. It wasn't hysterical laughter or nervous laughter. It was genuine amusement at the absolute absurdity of the situation. Here he was, a veterinarian from Montana, somehow having earned the loyalty of 12 cosmic dragons. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a bag he'd grabbed from his office out of habit. Inside were frozen protein blocks, the same kind Blaze had loved during his treatment. "Who wants treats?" Blake called out. 12 void serpents, each one capable of destroying a small fleet, each one an apex predator that made warships change course, perked up exactly like puppies hearing the word walk. Their tails started wagging, causing structural alarms to blare as they bumped against the hangar walls. Later that evening, Blake sat in his office with Blaze's tail curled comfortably around his chair. In the corner, a baby nebula kraken slept in its specialized containment tank, its tentacles twitching with dreams. Outside the window, 11 adult void serpents had positioned themselves around the station's exterior, forming a protective circle. Tix entered carrying the latest message from Galactic Medical Command. His hands were still shaking slightly, but he'd stopped fainting at least. "Sir, they're asking for a detailed report. They want to know how you did it. How you made apex predators become docile." Blake reached up and scratched Blaze's scales, earning a deep rumble of contentment that vibrated through the floor. "I didn't make them docile, Tix. That's the thing everyone keeps getting wrong." He looked at his assistant seriously. "I just reminded everyone that being scared, being hurt, and being dangerous aren't the same thing. These guys aren't monsters. They're just animals who needed help and found someone willing to give it." He paused, then grinned. "Plus, chin scratches work on literally everything. I'm pretty sure that's a universal constant." Through the window, the void serpents maintained their protective formation around Station Titan 7. The galaxy's most dangerous beings, standing guard over a human veterinarian who'd looked at a plasma-breathing dragon in pain and thought, "I can help." Humanity's reputation as the galaxy's crazy animal lovers was now officially cemented. And Blake? He was already sketching plans for expanding the pediatric wing. Something told him he was going to need more space.